Can they acquired? I wouldn't be surprised if it's not.
You like those Garber Bucks, don't you?
I do.
They have the money.
Yes,
they do have the money.
If
I'm not saying he'll come in and start. I'm saying start with quality.
I mean, if anybody, it would be a left back. If it's going to be a starter quality, it's going to be left back.
Yeah, and I think maybe a left wing, left mid to be able to put Ibarra at his preferred position.
Right.
Because as much as I like the guy and he's a fan favorite and has done so much for this team over the years, he hasn't done much this year in the stat column.
Yeah.
He's a hardworking player, and I loved his little header that he dove at after Ibarra scored. Like, he's the hardest working player on the field, but it hasn't shown up in the assist or goal column. So is that because he's playing in a position that he's not used to? That's probably part of it.
It could be, and I think that's why I made this argument last year, why Sam Nicholson won a spot over him was because Miguel was being forced to play on the left, which he's not a left back.
Well,
there were a number of times last season, briefly, where we looked really dangerous with Sam on the left and Miguel on the right because Miguel got to play in his actual spot. I think the problem is now that we have a lot of money that's going to sit on the bench. I mean, Miguel, Kevin, Finley, they all command decent salaries.
Right.
They're all right wingers.
We haven't even broached the subject of outgoing potential transfers, but we won't do that now. I guess we don't have the time. But
I would not be shocked, honestly, if Miggy left.
And we were talking about that at the beginning of the season. We'd all hate to see it, but it could happen. I could finish this up with maybe a kind of a direct quote from Adrian Heath, and he was just talking about the recent success they've had, and he's been thrilled with the additions they brought in the off season. But he directly said, "I'd like to bring in 2 or 3 in this window if we can." So
to that point, Adrian Heath literally says that every single time he's asked.
So is that pushing his players?
I'm just going to say that's just how Adrian Heath talks.
Yeah, I don't think that statement is necessarily any indication of how many players are going to be brought in.
Yeah.
I do think that there are going to be moves made, but if there's only one player versus 2 or 3, I wouldn't feel the need to say, you said there would be 2 or 3. But we moved Calvo, whether it was for an anticipation of a future move or because he was a liability, which he was. But something's going to be done with the allocation money we have received. Just off the cuff, I think would be interesting was to kind of go after teams like FC Cincinnati who really have nothing to lose and are looking for options.
Sure.
For some reason, whether it's been in FIFA or just watching, I've been a fan of Kakuta Mane, left wing.
Sure.
Could see him being like a coming off the bench player for the left, pushing Finley and Molino or Ibarra on the right where they would prefer. But that's the problem is every winger we have is starting quality and we pay them a decent amount of money.
Yep.
So who knows?
So to finalize this, guys, do you think that our GM rolls around in Garber Bucks at night? Do you think he has Garber Bucks, he throws them in the air and like rolls around on them kind of like Scrooge?
Do you think that there are actually like dollar bills with Garber faces?
Yeah, I think so. They
In
print them
Garber
all
we
out.
trust.
Yeah,
I believe
exactly
they're
right.
a printed currency.
Well, you guys remember DuckTales? Scrooge McDuck had the money
Yes.
bin, and he used to swim around it. You think that our GM swims around in the Garber Bucks? You think he does that?
Possibility.
Yeah, come on, he's got to. And if there are Garber Bucks, I want one. I just want to
frame it.
Just
Like
frame
my
it.
first Garber buck.
Exactly.
We may have
right.
to make one.
We should make them. Ooh, that'd be fun.
Be interesting.
Unless it's like a cryptocurrency or something like that.
I don't want to. Yeah,
We're not getting into that. So let's get off of soccer, guys. I think we've had a great podcast about soccer. Let's talk about beer.
Good. Sounds good to me.
Because, of course, we're at a brewery right now, and we drink beer to this podcast. GrowlerMagazine.com came up with the 12 beers, the most important beers in Minnesota history, a 12-pack of taste and influence. Okay?
Okay.
So they're talking about beers that have influenced Minnesota beer. And, of course, as we all know, Minnesota craft beer has exploded in the last 10 years, exploded around the country. But in Minnesota, we have our own little area here. So I'm going to go through these. You guys probably won't know a lot of them because they're old. I remember some of them and my parents drinking them or my grandparents drinking them. But Number 12 is James Page Brewing Company.
I know
Their
that name.
Boundary Waters Wild Rice Beer. Now, do you guys remember James Page beer at all?
No.
That name rings
It was
a bell.
around for a while,
rings
and so they opened shortly after Summit did, and they were one of the first microbreweries to focus on lagers rather than ales. So they were kind of a lager type of thing. And of course, wild rice being from Minnesota, it was
Right.
Makes perfect sense.
There are only 2 microbreweries in this list that you guys would probably know. Number 11 is Masala Mama IPA from Town Hall Brewery.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Town Hall's been around for, I think, since 1998, I believe.
Kind of a
West-
staple in the
Staple.
community.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
West Bank, right?
So they were kind of the first, the hop forward style IPA that came around in Minnesota. So, and then we go, number 10, we go to Rosie's Old Ale from Barley John's Brew Pub. Now, have you guys ever had Barley John's?
No.
No, I've heard of it.
You've seen
but-
it in stores.
Yeah.
The crazy thing about Barley John's is I've been to their brewery that they started with. It's in an old Chinese restaurant up in, I think it's Roseville.
Okay.
And so but they now make food there. And Barley John's been around for a while, making kind of kind of a little bit under the radar. But this one was been around 15 years. Their Wild Brunette Ale, which finished at 20% ABV.
Wow.
They don't make it like that anymore, but this was one of the first extreme craft beers in Minnesota that came around. Now of course, now you go to where do you go?
For breweries?
Yeah, you go to
Well,
Dangerous Man.
Dangerous Man is
Yeah.
the go-to. Also a big fan of Indeed. I think Insight's all right, but yeah, mostly if I'm going to a brewery, I like Dangerous Man because you can have a couple there, bring some home.
So think about the breweries you go to. Think about the ABVs on some of them, like how they are
Crazy.
Crazy. Think of 20% for a beer. I mean, that's let's flip it.
Oh,
nuts,
that's insane.
Right? That's insane. So this was like the first one to do that.
Which one was that one?
That was Rosie's Old Ale from Barley John's Brew Pub. So that was it. Now we come into Surly, of course, and you guys all know Darkness Russian Imperial Stout.
Oh, right, yeah.
The Darkness Days every year.
Yep.
And isn't it like a different recipe every
Different
year?
recipe every year. Different. They have a different theme to it every year.
Yep.
I've had them numerous years. Some
Yeah,
years
I've only
they're-
had a couple, but I've enjoyed them.
They're really good. So, of course, this was perhaps really the most important of Minnesota's cult beers, where we started to get kind of into the one-offs, the
Right.
once-a-year type of things. And now you go to breweries around here, and everybody has a one-off. They
Yeah.
do. It's like, oh, we got a special going on with this and
Yeah,
this and
seasonal
this.
beers are always the best.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So, of course, Surly came around with that. Then we go to, you guys remember this one, Pete's Wicked Ale.
I do
Sounds
remember
familiar.
that one.
You guys remember Pete's Wicked Ale?
Yeah.
I
Again,
think I was still drinking Miller Lite at that time, but
yeah, so Pete's, no, how I remember Pete's Wicked Ale is we were in college, and of course you could get, there was Red Dog, there was Ice House, and I think Pete's was one of the other ones too, where you get them for really cheap. You know, you could go into a store and they were kind of, the cheaper than the
Right.
Bud Lights and the whatever called. So they were headquartered in Palo Alto, but for years this beer was made in Minnesota, first at August Shell Brewing Company, which
Okay.
is the oldest brewery in Minnesota.
Right.
And then at Minnesota Brewing Company. And it was based on an English brown ale, but its popularity led to many seasonal variations. Pete's Wicked Ale represents the importance of contract brewing in Minnesota. Before we had the big microbrewery stuff, a lot of contracted brewers would come here and brew their beer in Minnesota and, of course, sell it as Pete's Wicked Ale. So, and then, this is my favorite. Number 7, we have Glick's Stite, which is a Glick's beer. Now, show you guys the can. Look at the can. Of course, podcast, you can't see it.
That
But-
looks like a can of soup.
But it looks like a can of soup.
Yeah.
Yeah,
or an old oil can or something.
exactly. So, Stite became the first patented malt liquor in 1943. So this was a malt liquor and gained some popularity as a wartime product that masked replacement fermentable materials with high alcohol. So, of course, at that time, we were trying to get everybody really drunk, wartime. Fast, exactly right. So, and at Glick's now, we have Glick's downtown, I think, I
Right.
believe.
I think they still brew their own. They have their own brews
Yes,
there.
they do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they called it the Green Death, is what they called it, because it's so high in
Looks like
alcohol.
it.
Yeah. Then we go to August Shell, of course, number 6, their Weiss, which is one of their, they still have it. They started in 1984. And I guess, have you had one of their Weisses?
Yep.
Any of August Shell's?
Oh, yeah. I'm a big fan of the Shell's Fire Brick in the winter.
Ooh, Fire Brick,
That's a good one.
that's good stuff. So, of course, they came out with the Weiss, and Weisses were not made in America very often. And
this is pre-Leinenkugel?
This is 84.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's pre-Leinenkugels.
Gotcha.
I know Leinenkugels came at...
Right, and they kind of just monopolized it.
Exactly right. So, we go from there, we go to Summit, their Extra Pale Ale at number 5.
Of course.
And Summit, as you guys know, they classify themselves as the first microbrewery in Minnesota.
Right.
Surly came along and exploded that scene. I mean, Surly took what Summit did and they just went and did it 100 times better than Summit did. And now Summit's, of course, trying to play catch-up. So.
Right.
And we've all had their Extra Pale Ale.
Oh, yeah, the EPA
It is what it is.
Oh, yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Then we actually have another, not really shells, but Bock beers, which are very famous around here now. Everybody has a Bock. Of course, August Shells down in New Ulm, they have Bock Fest every year.
Right.
In March, where they actually put a hot poker in the Bock and caramelize it, and then you drink it. It's actually really good. I've had the hot poker in the beer before. It's fantastic stuff. And at Bock Fest, you go around and try to find the Bock out in the woods in August Shells. You ever been to their brewery before?
No, I haven't.
If you get a chance, go there. It is your typical old school brewery. Like, they built it on a hill with a creek down below so they could store the ice underneath in caverns and all this stuff. It's amazing. So then we go number 3. You guys should know this. Schmidt beer.
Yeah, of course. Big factory in St.
Big
Paul.
factory in St. Paul. And the Schmidt beer cans were the thing. Now, did your parents ever collect the Schmidt beer cans, or grandparents?
No, but so what's funny is my family and I, we went to Shamrocks right down in that area in St. Paul, and I saw this giant Schmidt's beer plant, brewery, factory, whatever. I'm probably date myself a little bit how young I am, but I'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
And my dad's like, "You've never heard of Schmidt's?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "No." But so they were very familiar with it.
Schmidt's was huge back in the day, and their big thing was the cans. They always had like artwork on the cans, and I remember my grandfather would collect the cans because there was a series. Every year they had a series of different cans, and you would open them and then collect them on a wall. So you had like a wall of different beers is what you had. So, Sterling, you ever do that?
Yeah.
Stevens?
No,
Nobody
I
ever?
didn't either.
Man, guys, come on. Number 2, Grain Belt.
Of course.
Yeah, right.
Again, classic Minnesota brewery. I mean, Grain Belt is Minnesota beer. That's. I mean, we wouldn't be here today in a brewery if it wasn't for Grain Belt.
Premiums and Northeasts were all we had in our fridge in college.
Yep, premium Northeast. Well, yeah. In college we didn't have Northeast yet. We had just Grain
Again.
Belt. Yeah.
Never heard of Schmidt's. I had Northeast in college.
Yeah. Again, Grain Belt, we used to walk by. Remember when Northeast we lived up here? Walk by the sign. It's still there. You know, icon of Minnesota. And number 1, Ham's beer.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure.
Now, I will say this. When I was a kid, I used to go to the Moose Club with my dad. He was the governor and bartender there. The commercials would come out with the Ham's Beer Bear. Do you guys remember the Ham's Beer Bear?
No.
Land of blue sky waters.
Sky blue waters?
Yeah, exactly right. It was a big thing. Now, Ham's Beer, of course, was the biggest, one of the largest breweries in Minnesota history, and they distributed all over the country. I mean, this was like, Ham's Beer was Minnesota's like nationwide beer.
They were like Minnesota's Budweiser.
They were. They were. I mean, it was Budweiser
Wisconsin's
and
Miller.
You know, we had Budweiser. You had Miller Lite. Well,
Yep.
Miller companies and Hams and who was Wisconsin? We had Pabst.
Well, and then they had Schlitz.
And Schlitz. Yeah, Schlitz. I mean, there were some great breweries back in the day.
Yeah.
Of course, when everything started to fall apart and all these companies started buying other companies,
Yes.
and then of course after that happened and we had the 2 or 3 big conglomerates, we started getting microbreweries, and that's why this has all exploded. So that was number 1. So those 12 guys are the history of brewing in Minnesota, and I always want to look back at that and say, if it wasn't for these 12 different types of beers and a lot of other brewers, we wouldn't be sitting here today having a